review what happened on Tuesday for those who weren't here and those who were here but weren't paying attention. You were the only person who was, oh no, I guess Mira was here too. You, yeah, also not paying attention after a while. Okay, so wait, what happens? Oh, I think I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, so, all right, so part 1 on February 6th, we researched bcrypt versus bcrypt.js. We decided on the latter. Do either of you remember why? Yeah, why? Right, it seems to be the more recent preference of people.
Yeah, it's probably more secure. Better dependencies.
Well, the fewer dependencies, yeah. The fewer dependencies was another thing where you're just less likely to have conflicts if dependencies change, if you have fewer dependencies. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, we made our encrypt password and compare password functions. We added a test to check that the password was properly encrypted. And we discussed testing functions that return promises and how easy it is to get false positives. Is that something that James and Jen, you have experience with? How easy it is to get false positives?
Yes.
Yeah, and what is usually the reason for the false positives? Do you remember?
It's, from what I remember, it's that the test has run and not waited for the answer.
Exactly right. The test has run but not waited for the answer. Or, Jen, do you have anything to add to that?
It comes up with like false or whatever, but it just completely ignores. Maybe that's the same thing.
Yeah, well, what we were seeing, let's see if I can scroll up and find it. What we were seeing on Thursday or on Tuesday was stuff like the test returned green, everything was passing, but we actually got an error here. And yeah, it's a really common thing when you're testing promises. So Kelsey and Mira, do you remember what we had, do you remember what the cause of this was and what we had to do to prevent it? We didn't put the return. And why does the return prevent this?
Yeah, if you put return, then we'll wait until the promise resolves. Yeah, if you don't put return, it will not wait and give us the false positive.
Yeah, so we have, so for example, this one here, if we didn't put the return, it would run this line of code. It would not wait for the promise to resolve because it would feel like it was done, right? All you asked me to do in this callback is run this line of code. I've run the line of code. You didn't ask me to wait to see whether it was done. And what determines whether the test is positive or not? Whether an exception is thrown, yeah. And because if it runs this and just immediately moves on and doesn't wait for it to resolve, no exception is going to be thrown. The exception is going to come later after it's already determined that everything is cool and I can move on. So if you put a return here, then the function can't finish until this is resolved. And then when this is resolved, like either it will have thrown an exception or not. Yeah, so, okay, so that's this discussed functions that return promises and how easy it is to get false positives. Harped on using JSDoc. We started to create get user data, but then realized we needed a get user by email. we refuse to use chai includes despite Kelsey's best efforts.
That's why I lost interest.
Yeah, I see. It's like I have no input here. Forget it. Get user by email. So we're trying to write tests for get user by email, but we got stuck on comparing the object returned and the success case. And here's the reason. So I thought that I could just chain, like I just wanted to have these properties, and I didn't particularly care what the properties were, especially for stuff like joined at, where if it's just going to be whenever the user was created, I don't want to have to know the exact whatever millisecond that the user was created. I just want to know that it has a joined at property. Unfortunately, this chaining doesn't work because it takes the value of this email property and it expects that the value of that email property to have the property password. But the value of that email property is just a string. So it doesn't get past this. Bummer. Okay. So so the way we're going to resolve this is we are going to actually give the user some fixed joined at data. Instead of letting it do the default of current date, I'm actually going to give it a date. And then I'm going to export the user data from DB reset. So DB reset is where we're actually seeding the database, is where we're actually creating that user. And so what I want to do is I want to create all the user data in here and then export it so that my test can just use that same user data. And I'm not just like replicating the data in two places, which is always more dangerous. And because what if you change one and not the other? And in general, bad coding practice. Okay. Any questions on where we're going here? Yeah.
I was just wondering if couldn't you, instead of chaining all those different properties and have just do property infos and then
Oh, can you? Is that
well, no, I don't know if I can.
Oh, okay.
Kind of looks like
It looks like you can. Well, so we have two options here. We could either look at the documentation or we could just try it. I'm inclined to just try it. So, okay, so you're proposing that we do this. All right, I'm taking odds. I'm thinking 20% is going to work.
More like 60.
Oh, you think so? A sturdy spaghetti cannon. All right, let's try it. Let's see what happens. There's going to be suspense as it goes through all the other tests. Okay, so first of all, something failed. Yeah, it's expecting an object to have property email of password. Oh, it thinks the second thing is the value, an email of password. Oh, all right. We tried. Okay, so we're gonna have to go with. So I also talked about this, which on Tuesday, but this is when everybody was basically just watching Netflix on their computer and not paying attention to me. So the way I did this on my app when I wanted to check the properties is I did it using sets. I was like, here is a set of the properties I expect. I'm going to make a set of the properties that I got. Are these two sets equivalent? So that's another thing we could do here. For now, I'll do the the actual, making an actual user. So up here, I'm gonna just make the user data. So I'm gonna say const user data equals, okay, so we're gonna say email, and then password. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Oh, wait, this is not the right place. Excuse me. Okay, so email is test@test.com. Let's see. Password is plain text. City is Oakland. And then I think I'm going to do primary city here now because I'm going to be doing a deep equals to whatever I get back from the database. And so I want to have the same key as whatever I'm going to get back from the database. How do I just get a date object that is right now? I think I can just do this. Let's try it.
Today's date is all consistent. Just 1, 2, and 8.
Wait, what's that? Oh, today's date. Yeah, we're all 2 0 1s and 8s. How very efficient with you know, once you pull the numbers for the year, you've got everything you need. Okay. All right, so let's look at the schema again. And all right, so we're going to need an image URL and the ID. The ID is a tricky one. I don't want to give it an ID because if I do, then it won't bump up the next ID to use for serial and we're going to get in trouble. I mean, I do have a couple options. I could just give it a really big ID, and then if I end up adding other users for my tests, it won't really matter that I have an ID of 400. I'm trying to think. This really just makes me want to go back and just do my sets thing because, like, that's all I really care about. But I'll continue with this and we'll try and get around it. Okay. Okay, so image URL is just going to be nothing. We can change that later. And then the nice thing is if we change it later, we just have to change it here and the test will automatically do what we want. ID. What are we going to do about ID? Our choices are we can assume it's going to be 1. It's probably a reasonable assumption. Yeah. What do you have to say about that, Celeste? I heard your tongue click.
Is it does the number? I'm guessing the serial number resets and draw the table and
Yeah.
and not anything else, like not how to do this. Or are we doing that for like our report?
Yeah, we are. That's a good question. So you just want to make sure that it's going to reset on every test, which is a great thing to make sure. And before each, we're doing this reset the database. That it doesn't drop the tables, but it truncates them. Let's look. It truncates the tables and it does this restart identity, which resets the serial. Yeah.
I'm just curious why you need to check that all the comments. Why you need to check like it has 5 out of those 7 lines.
That's a good question. What's the purpose of this test? What's the purpose of this test that we're doing? I mean, I say it returns an object with the expected properties, but let me ask you, how would you test to get user by email?
How would I test it other than using includes? I don't know.
Why? Okay, all right. So let's go back. My purpose in testing that all of the properties are there is I want to know what properties I can expect to come out of this of this particular function. And the purpose of the test is to know that if the properties that are coming out of that function change, I think that has the potential to mess up some of my other code. Some of my other code is going to assume that I'm going to get certain properties here. And if I don't, I'm guessing, you know, I just want to ensure that my assumptions of what I'm getting here are going to be solid when it comes to writing other functions. If my other functions assume that I'm getting a joined at here, I want to know that I'm getting a joined at. My other functions assume that I'm getting an image URL. I want to know that I'm getting an image URL. So if I decide that later, for whatever reason, when I do a get user by email, I'm like, you know what? Actually, I don't think I need everything here. I really just need the ID. Then that test will break. And when a bunch of my other tests will probably break too, the tests that are testing the functions that that have the, you know, that are using the joined at, right? Like those tests will probably break too. But the fact that this test broke will give me a hint as to what's going wrong. Have I convinced you?
I can, like, maybe not for this test, but I can see sort of, could make a difference. Yeah, like integrated integration tests or something.
Yeah, it's
If you plug in and you know, like, this is the only place it's possibly going to get this email. It's this data. It comes back. That's those properties. I'm convinced that it works, you know, personally. Like, but
but okay, but
you test on other things and they all work. You know.
but what do you choose to test?
Well, I mean, this on this one, I could test the properties, all the properties. Like,
You would
I
test the
test the
joined
value.
at. You would just test the property and not the value.
Yeah. I mean, but if I would,
Okay, we could do that if you wanted to just test the property.
I thought that's what we were doing.
Right. Well, so right. So there are two ways. So if you want to just test the property and not the value. So first of all, I don't think you and I are disagreeing, right? I think you and I are agreeing that we want to make sure that it returns all of the properties, right? There are two ways we could do that. If we didn't care about the values, there are two ways we could do that. One is one way. One way would be to make a bunch of different expects, right? We couldn't chain these. We would have to make a bunch of different expects. And we could do that, right? There's nothing preventing us from making a bunch of different expects for each of the properties. I would put them all in different tests because I am of the school that each test should have exactly one expect. That way, you know that if you fix that expect, the test will pass. I don't like it to have unpredictable, you know, maybe you have to fix that expect and then the test still doesn't pass because there's another expect that fails. Plus you get more green check marks and that's fun, right? So we could make a bunch of different tests. And in this case, I would not do a before each. I would just do a before, because I would do a before and I would run this also before, because I don't want to have to take the time to do that reset for every single one. It's just not necessary, right? The other would be to use my set trick. Right now, I keep changing my mind, I know, but right now I'm actually feeling like doing the bunch of different expects. Let's just do that. I'm not going to use includes.
It's like, versus just want to do it the hard way.
How is this harder than using it? But whatever. All right.
Because includes could do all those different specs.
It can't.
But you haven't yet?
No, it's for chai, but it can't. I looked. It can't do all of them in one line.
What's that?
Okay. All right. Fine. You tell me. You tell me the line that will do all of them. Yeah, and tell me the. Here, I'll put this back.
Just do expect user row to include, and then put the whole whatever in the object.
The whole
The
whatever.
whole object you're getting back.
The whole object. But then we would have to know the values as well.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I was doing over when I was doing this over here, when I was actually making an object that we were going to compare. And I would actually probably just do a deep equal if I were actually making that whole object. Include as if you want a subset of the object.
Oh, well, I mean, you can actually, I think you don't do everything.
Right, you could do a subset.
You can do a subset. So
Right, but I would do the whole object and do a deep equal.
For objects, doesn't it equal the same object that comes from the same person?
No. Deep equal means that they have the same keys and values. I think equal is the same place in memory. If you
yes.
want to disprove me, go for it. Okay, so I'm back to this one. I know I've just changed my mind 100 times here, but so what Kelsey is proposing is basically what I was going to do here when I was going to do all the user data, but I've decided that I just don't want to take that trouble. So
show you an example line.
yeah, no, I know how includes works, right? Yeah. It's basically like a deep equal, but with the subset of the object. Yeah. It does not test for like all of the properties.
Unless you put them all in.
And if you put them all in there, you might as well do a deep equal. Okay, so after this, I want to take a poll and just see, like, after all of this, like, where people are standing, because I'm curious. I need to do the global variable thing because I'm gonna reference user row in all of my tests, and in order to do that, I have to scope it outside of the before. So now to do a return here. So now I can say it returns an object with the email property. And here I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to make a different describe here. User exists, because I also want to do a test for when the user doesn't exist. Gotten a little lost in the weeds here, so but what's that?
I'd never seen a nested description.
Yeah.
I've seen context.
Describe and context are just aliases for each other. Okay, so yeah, so I could do context here instead. It'd be exactly the same thing. Okay, so user exists. Before, reset the database and retrieve existing user. Okay, and then hold on. Okay, and then we expect it to return a row with the email property. I'll leave those. And then we want password. And then we want joined at. And then we want image URL. And then we want primary city. And then we want ID. Oops. Got all of them. Oh no, I didn't close all of these its. That's a bummer. Okay. Let's see, so I'm gonna do, oh no, really? Okay, let's see, do this. Okay, I find it very satisfying to do stuff like that. All right, now the rest of these just need, I could have done this. Okay, whatever. Okay, so, sort of good. Just do one more thing. Oh, and there are ways that you could that you can have it automatically formatted rather than like being so fussy about it like this. But there are like, you know, things that will format it for you. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, have we done all returns where we need to do returns? I believe we have. Okay, assertion tested must be an array. Oh, object tested must be an array. Interesting. Who's laughing at me?
No, I'm laughing because it said it could be an object, but then it says but it's
Yeah, asshole.
I don't want to make you angry, but why are you using includes? Because you're just testing a property now, right?
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you're properly afraid of my anger. To have property. Yeah, I had forgotten that I had changed it to includes just to appease the touchier members of the audience. Good observation. Very interesting. Okay, so let's see why it didn't include the image URL. Maybe if it's null, it doesn't return it? Well, I did when I was actually creating the object. When I was creating the object that I was going to do the deep equals with, but then I abandoned the deep equals. So basically, I think so that's interesting. So we learned that it is, if you don't actually give it an image URL, or if it's null, then it won't populate it. Cool. So we'll just do that here. Then I'm going to have to change this here and this here. And who knows, someday I might want to give it an image URL 6 months from now when I'm actually coding that part of the project.
I was just pointing out that if you weren't expecting all the properties, then you would maybe find out that you weren't.
Ah, thank you. Thanks for being my defender. Totally appreciate it. All right. What's image URL of relation users does not exist? Bullshit. Oh, I wonder if I need to, I wonder if I actually changed the user table, and right now I'm not removing the tables and remaking them as part of my reset. I'm just truncating the existing tables. So for example, if I go into Roam test here and I look at my users table, yeah, I had changed it to just image URL from user image URL. So see, this is incredible testing. Cool. So now let's see what I have in my package JSON, whether I actually have a test DB create. Yeah, so let's do a test DB reset here instead, and I'm going to do drop DB if exists Roam test. \D and then the table name. All right, so now we can actually let's go back here and run the test again. Okay. All right, so while I'm committing, if people had the choice, so if you were doing this on your own, after all of this discussion, would you do a bunch of different tests with each of the properties the way we did here? Would you do create a user object before you add it via seed and then do a deep equal on that user object? Or would you make a set the way I did and compare the sets? To be honest, I think my answer is this. I think I like this better than the sets because it's sort of cleaner. It tells you one by one whether each of the properties are there. The set will tell you, because it'll be like, this set doesn't match this set, and you can compare what's different. I guess the set is a little bit better in that if it had more properties than I was expecting, then the sets won't be equal that way, right? So I take it back. I think I'm going to stick with the sets. But, and as far as I'm concerned, the deep equal and the includes are the same solution, because the deep equal is just an includes with the entire object.
Yeah, I just thought you.
That's yeah. Yeah.
Knowing exactly what the.
Oh, what the date was for the, yeah, but exactly what the value was for just some of them. Yeah. Anyway, so I won't make everybody say, but do people have general opinions on?
I'm sorry, can you describe the sets?
Yeah, so what I can actually show you what I did with the sets in let's see. Nope, not that one. Oh, come on. Okay. Let's see. So the current branch that I'm on is Grider Authentication, because I am it's fun, man. This app is coming together with React. It's super fun. I basically kind of want to work on it all the time, but so if we go into server and test and model, and we'll go into, let's say, chart test. Okay, and I actually, because my tests are so similar for all my models, I have these like weird, like get children, anyway, whatever. So success charts. So I'm adding to DB. Okay, so I'm adding this chart. And there's the failure. Oh, right. And then I just have these add to DB success tests. So I like, in order to keep my code dry, I have like, I don't actually write out the tests. So this might, but let's look at the add to DB success tests. I may or may not be able to. And I've been thinking about whether or not it's good to have, like, it's good because my code is dry, and it was actually, once I wrote my test for my first model, it was super easy to write my tests for the other models because I could just use it and I didn't have to do any copy pasting and whatever. But it also abstracts the tests in a way that makes them kind of hard to navigate. So, you know, as far as like readability goes, it's not that great. But so add to DB success. So if I'm adding to DB and expecting, so reset the DB and add the item, it should return a number for whatever the ID is. And then, oh no, and then it looks for each of the fields. Wait, hold on. Okay, now I'm actually not sure. So I'm gonna go, because I'm curious where I did that. So I'm gonna cd user, or let's okay, what is this command doing?
Recursively and it's insensitive or set.
And in this directory, the dot, the word set. So I totally lied. Apparently I'm not using sets. apparently I'm checking everything individually rather than using sets. Maybe I thought about using sets and just abandon it. So total liar, sorry.
It's your React project you're doing following the course?
For parts of it, I am following the course right now. But there's a lot of parts where I'm actually doing, things on my own. So the back end, I didn't do following the course, except for parts of the authentication. But the front end, I did the whole modern React Redux. And then I started making components, but I realized I really needed authentication because I want this to have user logins so everybody can have their own charts and people can't look at each other's charts unless they make them public or whatever. And so the authentication, I'm following the course. There's one part of the authentication that I'm not following the course, and that is he uses a MongoDB and I'm using Postgres. I'm interested in doing a project with Mongo, but I've torn this project up and redone it so many times. And I already have, as you saw, I already have a really extensive testing for my Postgres database, and I just don't feel like throwing all that away. So, yeah, but I'm going to talk some about the authentication. So today's instruction is going to be on Passport, and I'm going to talk about the authentication that Stephen taught me. So, okay, so all we did today was test that the properties matched, but we had a lot of discussion, and we're going slow. It's just the way it is. So add tests that get user email returns the expected properties. Cool. Go to check-in and then come back here for some